want to welcome everybody to our candidate forum. This is Miriam Raftery, editor of East County Magazine and host of the East County Magazine radio show. Welcome to our candidate forum for San Diego's 4th Supervisorial District. There are 4 candidates running in the August 15th special election to represent this district and fill the vacancy left by the resignation of Nathan Fletcher. The district includes much of Central and South San Diego County, as well as the SDSU College area and the East County communities of Casa de Oro, Crest, Tehisa, La Mesa, Lemon Grove, Spring Valley, Mount Helix, and Rancho San Diego. And so we're honored to have candidates here today. There are, as I say, there are 4 running. Unfortunately, Paul McQuigg, who's a Marine Corps veteran, just notifies us that he's traveling overseas and unfortunately could not get a connection. And we are still waiting on Janessa Goldbeck, who had RSVP'd that she would participate, who RSVP'd that she would participate, but is not yet here. So if she pops in, we'll certainly welcome her. But in the meantime, we're going to go ahead and get started. So welcome to our participating candidates who are here today. Monica Montgomery Steppes, President Pro Tem of the San Diego City Council, and Amy Reichert, a private investigator and founder of Reopen San Diego. So without further ado, we're going to go to opening statements. You will each have 2 minutes to introduce yourselves, tell us a little bit about your most important experience or qualifications, and your most important goals if elected. 2 minutes each. Amy, let's start with you.
All right. My name's Amy Reichert, and I've lived here in San Diego since I was 4 years old. And the reason why I'm running for county supervisor is because I've never seen things as bad as they are right now. Just in the past couple years, our population as a county has declined by 50,000. And when I've asked my friends, family, and loved ones why they're leaving San Diego County, they're saying things like, I just want to be able to afford a single family home. And that's why they're going to places like Tennessee, Texas, or Florida. They're also saying things like homelessness are way out of control. So last year, I challenged Nathan Fletcher because his failed policies have just been taking San Diego on a disastrous course. Crime is at an all-time high. We're also seeing cost of living issues, of course. And what we really need at the end of the day, and what people tell me that they want, is a safe, affordable place that they can enjoy with their families. So I'm here to take San Diego in a completely different direction. I do come to this race with a business mindset. I've been a successful businesswoman for the past 24 years. And in the past couple years, I founded a successful nonprofit that was able to save thousands of city workers from getting terminated. So I'm really proud of our track record and what we've been able to do. And at the end of the day, the reason why I challenged Nathan Fletcher last year as well was some of the divisive rhetoric that he would use towards his own constituents. And so what I have led in this race so far, and I'm looking at my fellow candidates, and I respect my fellow candidates, and I'm happy to say that it's been a very civil race so far, and I look forward to all of the questions today during the forum.
Very good, thank you. Janessa Goldbeck has joined us, so Janessa, thank you. And I forgot to introduce our timekeeper, Brenda, who's going to, actually, folks, if you can all open chat, what Brenda can do is she can give you a 10-second warning, and then, time's up, we'll say time's up, and you can finish the sentence, and we're going to try to stay on track. And Janessa, for your benefit, one candidate, Paul McQuigg, was unable to join us. He's traveling overseas and unfortunately was not able to get a connection, but that means everybody else gets a little bit more time. So next, let's hear from Monica Montgomery Steppes with your opening statement.
Thank you so much, Miriam, for organizing this, Brenda, for keeping us on track with the time. My name is Monica Montgomery Steppes, and I currently serve as the City Council member for District 4 in the City of San Diego, and Council President Pro Tem over the City Council, which really just means that if the Council President's not there, then I convene the meeting. So I'm very happy again to be here and to be running in this in this special election. I hope that everyone received their ballots today, or hopefully you will get them tomorrow. I grew up in the Supervisorial District. Right now, I serve the community that raised me. I've been here for over 35 years. I spent my college years in Atlanta, Georgia, and came back to San Diego for law school. Since then, I have worked for 3 different elected officials and also at the ACLU leading a local campaign on bail reform. I have been elected for 5 years, and in that 5 years, I have convened the council and facilitated our budget process over the $5.2 billion budget that we have at the city of San Diego. I have also helped homeowners, first-time home buyers, particularly of color, get down payment assistance in the entire region in the amount of $7.5 million and counting. I have also been able to institute policies and lead initiatives like the peace movement, Let's Live, Let's Love, that promotes peace in our communities. Right now in the calendar year from 2021 to 2022, in my district that I have jurisdiction over, we have seen a 9% decrease in crime and overall crime, and citywide, because of the policies that I put forward, we have seen a 65% decrease in gang violence and homicide. So those are the types of things that I want to bring to the city, that I'm doing at the city and want to bring to the county. The county has much larger infrastructure to deal with a lot of the issues and crises that we are facing.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead and, yeah, that's time.
Okay, that's time. All right, thank you. Looking forward to the questions. Thanks so much.
That's okay. There will be
looking at
closing
the
statements,
chat.
so if someone missed something important, we can throw it in at the end. Janessa, let's hear from you, your opening statement with your number 1 experience and qualifications.
Sure. Well, first of all, I just want to apologize for being late. Someone very close to me lost their brother to a fentanyl overdose recently, and I'm actually in the parking lot of the service right now.
I'm so sorry.
Mount Helix La Mesa family, actually. So, you know, when I talk about the scale of, I'm a little bit raw right now coming in, so I apologize if I'm a little emotional, but the scale of the crisis, there were a couple hundred people here, teachers, you know, coaches, family members, friends of the family. And I just think, you know, we obviously, all 3 of us who are in this race, the 4 of us are in this mix. I think we all recognize the scale of the crisis and how real it is in our community. So anyways, again, apologies for being late and not communicating, but I wanted to respect the service. For those of you I haven't met who may be watching this recording later or the live stream, my name is Janessa Goldbeck. I was born and raised here in San Diego County. My mom was a public school teacher at Vista Public Schools. My dad drove a tow truck. I was very fortunate to get to go to school in Chicago. I studied journalism and African studies. As part of my studies, studied abroad in Uganda and Rwanda, and learned that there was an ongoing genocide in the Darfur region of Sudan, not too far away. So came back to the US, started organizing on my campus. After college, my first chapter of my career, I worked as a human rights advocate, working to pass federal legislation to protect civilians in conflict zones. And that's really where I cut my teeth on learning how to build coalitions to get things done, even big problems in remote parts of the world. That experience brought me for the first time into direct contact with folks who served in the military. I really didn't know many growing up, although both my grandparents served in World War II. Both my grandfathers. I decided to join the Marine Corps at the age of 26 to get a different side of the civilian protection experience. I think we have a lot to talk about, and I've been sort of all over the place today, but I think the number 1 thing I bring to this race is not only my 15 years of experience as a policy advocate, but also my deep commitment to getting things done, to moving the ball forward, not accepting the status quo as things are, and working to make a better county and a better place for all San Diegans.
Thank you so much. Homelessness is a huge issue. San Diego has one of the largest homeless populations in the nation. And now that the city of San Diego has banned homeless camps and is adding more shelters, there are some concerns that more homeless may move into East County, which already has about a quarter of the county's homeless population. In talking with homeless people and advocates for them, we've learned that some don't want to go into available shelters because of reasons such as not wanting to give up their dog or not wanting to be separated from a partner, either straight or gay, or an adult child with disabilities that their parent doesn't want to be separated. Some women say they've been assaulted in shelters and they'd rather stay on the streets where at least they can have pepper spray, to defend themselves. So I would like to hear from each of you what your ideas are for helping the homeless, as well as protecting communities from problems that can be caused by homelessness. And also, would you support a study to look at innovative solutions to help those whose needs may not be being met by the existing shelters, such as maybe having a shelter with a kennel or a place where partners could stay together? Monica, we'll let you open with this one. We're going to be alternating, so everybody will get a chance to be first and last.
Yes, thank you for the question and the way that you framed it. I really appreciate that. Yes, I would support a study. I do think that there are a lot of studies out there right now, and this really is about implementation and figuring out, how much money are we going to have from, the federal government and state government on an ongoing basis in order to really deploy the solutions that we know.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and I just want to interject. I'm sorry, I forgot to add 3 minutes each on this question. So.
Okay. Those solutions that are tried and proven and true, which actually when you talk to advocates, but more so people who are currently unhoused, there are really a lot of good solutions on the table. You talked about the encampment ban, and so I did not support that ban for a lot of different reasons. I currently represent neighborhoods outside of downtown. And there's always a concern that folks would have to be driven to go to places that don't have the resources for them. Mm-hmm. And so when East Village was developed, really there were a lot of people there that either lived in single residency occupants that were torn down in order to create East Village, and there was not a plan on where the folks that were living there currently would be able to go. And so that's where a lot of the issues are coming from. And I think that needs to be confronted. And when we're dealing with how to solve the problem. So there, like you said, we could do a study, and studies are important because we have to make informed decisions, but also, we know what we are lacking. We know what works, right? So what we are lacking is people who are willing to and are able to work in this space, because people who are working in the space are underpaid. I think a partnership with the community colleges to gear people towards this work, and also wage increases for them, it's going to help. Enticing folks like, doing student loan forgiveness and things like that are really going to help. Of course, we have to build. There's new innovative projects like shipping containers that are being turned into homes, and that with minimal impact to the environment. There's so many things out there, but the plan, the study is good, but the plan has to be comprehensive, and it has to be detailed out so that we are implementing that plan every single day. There's so many good resources out there, but the systems that we have been paying for as taxpayers to integrate the services are not working for us. So those also need to be more robust so that people don't fall through the cracks. The last thing I'll say is everyone is not the same. Every person is different that is living on the street. Every solution is going to be different. The more case managers that we can get to walk people through these systems, the better it will be for all of us.
Very good. Thank you. Amy, let's hear your views on the homeless crisis.
So we are way beyond the point of it being a homelessness crisis. It is a humanitarian crisis that needs to be addressed right away. And so what I suggest is that we approach this with compassion. We know that a segment of our unhoused are domestic violence victims, the disabled, the elderly, our veterans, for example, and the disabled. I had a great conversation yesterday with the San Diego Rescue Mission. They've just opened up their navigation center in the North County, and I'm happy to say they have kennels for people who are unhoused. Yes, I know.
We need one in
is
East County.
Great news. Yes. And regarding the issue of people who are disabled, this is an issue that's very close to my heart. My own father was in a wheelchair by the time I was a teenager because he had multiple sclerosis. And so I have spoken with stakeholders, but also people with lived experience on this issue. So I've spoken with the East County Transitional Living Center. I've spoken with Solutions for Change in the North County, and I've spoken with the San Diego Rescue Mission. And so when it does come to the disabled, there are places where the disabled can go. Unfortunately, there's nowhere where somebody in a wheelchair who cannot provide for themselves can go at this time. So that's something that I would address in my first 100 days. But let me just give you a big picture view of what I think needs to happen so we can really have some change here. There's also a segment of the homeless population that we must admit that the root cause of their homelessness is where severe addiction, severe mental illness, and crime intersect. And so when it comes to those who are committing serious crimes, serious repeat crimes that are causing small businesses to lock their doors during the day and only open them when they see a customer wants to come in, where we're seeing coffee shops like the one in Hillcrest leave Hillcrest because they can no longer guarantee the safety of their patrons or their customers. Here's what I suggest. We must absolutely require treatment, not jail, for the ones that are committing serious crimes. It is the most loving thing we can do because jails are not built, nor are they staffed to be able to care for people with severe mental illness or severe drug addiction. And of course, what we've seen in our jails is unacceptable. We've had people overdosing and committing suicide. So what I recommend is mandatory treatment for those who are committing serious crimes. We also learned a lot, according to the Alpha Project, from having unhoused people in our convention center during the pandemic. It was very controversial, but we learned we need a regional response. That's why I support the plan by Bill Walton to have a homeless triage center, a navigation center, if you will, that will be a centralized regional location where people can get shelter and then get appropriate services through different nonprofits who have evidence-based treatments and are showing results. It's not compassionate to allow people to sleep and die on our streets. So I believe in a combination of compassion and accountability will make a difference and save lives. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Amy. Janessa, let's hear from you, 3 minutes on how you would address the homelessness crisis in San Diego.
Sure. And thank you again for how you framed this question, really acknowledging that there are many, many different types of people on the streets, and some of them are more visible than others. And so I think when I think about this issue, as the council member said, this isn't just a one-off crisis. We know that we have a perpetual need for services and additional housing for people because the state of California has a real lack of affordable housing. In fact, rents in San Diego are now higher than they are in San Francisco. So for most people are maybe just a paycheck or a catastrophic illness away from losing their housing. So as much as we need to do to stem, to address the crisis on our streets, we need to think about this as a perpetual need and think about the whole continuum. So I'll start with emergency shelters. As you pointed out, there are a lot of different types of folks on the streets who need a lot of different types of shelter. And the reality is that we don't even have enough beds to meet the current need. So the county can really step up and play a role by helping to open shelters that meet diverse sets of needs, using its own land and bringing in service providers to do that. Whether that's seniors who need additional help because they can't meet their activities of daily life on their own, or people with animals, or people who are in same-sex relationships, or people who have small kids with them. They all have very, very different needs. And so I think we need to do a little bit of everything, everywhere, and all at once. Open up our lands, think about how we can get to yes on more facilities that can address unique populations. Second, we have an absurd reality, which is that we're using our county jails as our largest mental health service provider in the region. And our region is currently short approximately 700 psychiatric beds. There was a study done recently that showed over the next decade, we're going to need an additional 18,000 behavioral health workers. That's psych nurses, addiction counselors, social workers to meet the scale of the need. So the county really needs to invest in finding a way to be able to fund that and treat it as the crisis that it is, really prioritizing making sure that we're hiring the behavioral health workforce we need, and working aggressively with the federal, state, and local government to open more psychiatric beds. Finally, there's the prevention piece. As I mentioned earlier, we know rents are way too high, and a lot of people are very close to being on the brink. So the county currently has a pilot program where they provide a couple $100s a month to landlords who've had to raise their rents because of inflation. And so the seniors who are on a fixed income, currently just over 200 seniors are enrolled in this program. They're able to stay in their home even though the rent has gone up, and the landlord's able to get their market rate rental value. And so I'd like to see that program expanded to more populations and made permanent. And that's going to require, really being aggressive about what sort of funding we go after, working with our state partners to write legislation that funds this as a perpetual need. But I think those are 3 tangible things the county can do to make a difference.
Very good. Thank you very much, Janessa. On to our next question, and we'll give you 2 minutes each on this one. We're trying to get as many questions in as we can. Housing. San Diego is one of the highest cost housing markets in the nation. And while the county's made some strides toward building more housing, multifamily housing, a lot of it still is not truly affordable. Efforts to build more homes have run into problems of their own, such as judges who have blocked sprawling rural projects due to fire evacuation concerns, traffic so people can get out. And when high rises are built in residential areas, then neighbors are complaining of parking problems and blocking sunlight and increasing traffic jams on surface streets in places like Spring Valley. So I would like to ask each of you what approaches you support to meet our region's housing need, especially affordable housing, while addressing, the concerns of all of the residents. Amy, I think it's your turn to go first on this one.
Well,
2 minutes.
I'll
2
be the
minutes.
first one to say yes. Oh my gosh, San Diego is not affordable. I can remember just 10 years ago when my husband and I were able to buy a home, and we looked at homes in our price range. We were showed homes next to freeway on-ramps, under freeway overpasses, and next to electrical substations. I'm very glad that we were able to buy an old hoarder house, and we have rebuilt it with our own hands. It's a very difficult market here in San Diego because it's very desirable. Everybody knows that. But there's some things that I believe that the government is doing that's getting in the way of sensible building. Let me just give for example. What happened was when we capped building of single family homes right here in San Diego County, what we saw was massive sprawl being built in Southern Riverside, so Temecula. So now what we have are people who live in Temecula, Murrieta, and they are commuting every day to San Diego, which is not helping our environment. So those are the unintended consequences of not building sensibly. Now, let me just say, I'm against sprawl. 100%. I would never want anything built that would put our firefighters in danger or be a wildfire risk to people in the county. But we're also seeing, as I mentioned earlier, how 50,000 people have left the county, and many of them are saying that they want affordable housing. I want to conclude by saying I don't believe that SB 10 is the solution to our housing problems, and here's why. SB 10 allows for the bulldozing of single-family homes, and in its place, a very dense apartment unit is built. And these units are typically not for sale. These are for rent. And of course, all we're seeing is every year the rents just keep going up. So again, we want to be able to build things that people actually want, like affordable single-family homes. But instead, what SB 10 does is it's bulldozing the existing housing stock that we have, and it's going to make the price of a single-family home go up. So what I would suggest is sensible building that is environmentally sensitive to the wildfire concerns and escape routes also in the county, to be built in the eastern parts of our unincorporated county, but also in the southeastern parts of our county. Because again, people just want a safe place, affordable place that they can live. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. As Janessa so eloquently pointed out, we have a drug crisis in our county right now. A new Sandag study just out the past week or so shows that 60% of the people arrested in our county jails are on methamphetamines, and many of them are on other drugs. Fentanyl is also the #1 cause of death in county jails, but beyond that, fentanyl deaths have risen something like 900% in the general population as well, affecting people like Janessa's friend. So I'd like to ask each of you, what needs to be done to prevent drug abuse and help those with addictions? And I would add, I believe supervisors recently declared a fentanyl crisis. Do we need to extend that to include methamphetamines as well? Janessa, we'll do 2 minutes each. You're first.
Sure. And I'm happy to answer this one. Just want to point out that we skipped over the housing question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh my gosh. No, let's backtrack a minute. My deepest
That's okay.
apologies. Janessa, go ahead and answer the housing one. And then
You want me to?
yeah,
Okay,
go ahead
great.
and answer the housing question. My apologies.
Lots of very important topics. Both are very important. So, to me, this is the issue of our time here in San Diego County. It is the underpinning of our homelessness crisis. It's the underpinning of, our losing jobs to other regions because we don't have workforce housing. And it's incredibly important that we try to get to yes in a way that both meets our housing goals and our climate goals on projects. And I'm very proud to be endorsed by our county firefighters. I don't believe in building in high wildfire areas. It's obviously led to a lot of major issues in both our county and our state with increasingly hot summers and increasingly extreme fires. So that's really important. But I do think that the County Board of Supervisors has the opportunity to really ensure that our county in the unincorporated areas, eastern, southern parts of the county, are doing everything we can to meet our state mandated housing goals. And right now, we're nowhere close to meeting those, which is why we continue to have such high costs for housing, both rentals and for purchase. So one of the ways that I think we could do that is maximizing areas that have already been developed in the unincorporated areas, places that have urban cores, established job sites, schools, homes, places like Lakeside, Spring Valley, Rancho San Diego that are looking for an investment in infrastructure. I was out in Rancho San Diego recently and talking to community members there, and they were talking about the state of their roads and their lack of public transit. For too long, the Board of Supervisors has treated the unincorporated parts of the county as sort of the stepchild to the urban center of San Diego. And I think we need to flip the script on that and start putting our money where our mouth is. If we say we're serious about solving the housing crisis, we have to build more housing. And there's a lot of communities out there who would love the investment of mass transit, would love the investment of additional resources to help their communities thrive.
Thank you. Let's go back to the drug question now about how you would address the drug crisis in San Diego. Janessa.
Well, I also want to give the council her opportunity to talk about housing.
I'm sorry. Who did we miss?
Me. It's okay.
I'm sorry, Monica. I'm tired. You can tell.
I think we all can
understand.
It's I'm sitting here with this leg that's like throbbing. I got a spider bite or something. My whole leg is black and blue. So I'm heading to the ER as soon as we're done with this in the urgent care. But
There's
anyway,
so much going on here.
Go ahead, Monica. Let's hear from you.
Sorry to everyone. And
yeah, no, let's hear from you on the housing crisis.
Okay, just this is when you frame the question, Miriam. There is a lot of resistance on all sides to housing, yet there's also a lot of resistance to homelessness. And I see there's an intersection there, right? So we have to be able to be a place where people can raise their families and people can live here, or we will have more people on the streets. Now, not everyone is on the street because of an economic issue, but a recent study just came out that said that the majority of people that are on the streets are because of an economic issue. And that means they cannot afford housing here. So I say all this to say that these votes that I have taken for more housing have been very, very tough votes. Because community members do not, there's a lot of fear about seeing the character of the neighborhoods change. But I say, and I will say here and I continue to say that this is the issue of our time, and it is impacting every other crisis that we are seeing in the county. we have to be able to provide more housing. So there are a lot of things that we can do. We can provide better departmental permitting. We can prioritize building affordable housing in higher resource areas so that we have a balance across the entire region. There are HUD regulations that require us to spread housing out, especially affordable housing, so that we're not building pockets of poverty, right? And we don't want the East County to experience that imbalance. You know, we want to have balanced housing across the entire region. So I support inclusionary housing. I support the possibility of ADUs being used for home purchase. That is something that is a conversation at the state right now. So we have to attack it from all levels for our lower to moderate income folks that are here and want to stay in San Diego and keep their talent within our region.
Very good. I'm going to try and get us back on track time-wise. So I think if we can answer the drug one in about a minute and a half each, I'd like to hear from each of you how you would address this problem of soaring drug use, 60% of inmates on methamphetamine, many on other drugs, and a 900% increase in fentanyl deaths countywide among the general population. Janessa, we'll let you go first on this one.
Sure. Well, we know that fentanyl is the leading cause of death for adults in this country now, under the age of 45. That is an insane statistic. And I think, I mentioned earlier how deeply personal this issue is to me, and I'm sure to all of us who have had an experience with it. A couple of things. One, we know that the county is about to receive $100 million in settlement resources from the opioid crisis, and that those funds can go directly into our community to be used to both prevent fentanyl from getting into our community and treat and help people who are already addicted. So a couple of different things. Narcan is a nasal spray which can reverse the effects of an overdose. I would like that to be available as frequently in the general public as AEDs are, defibrillators for folks having a heart attack. There's no reason that every restaurant, every bar, every school shouldn't have access to that in a very accessible way, because it can save a life. And I fundamentally believe that is a very tangible thing the county can do right away. Second, we know that drugs are making their way into our jails and that people are dying in our jails as a result. And so some of those opioid funds I'd like to be able to put into resourcing our law enforcement partners to be able to make sure that drugs are not entering our jails. And finally, I'm proud to say I'm endorsed by the folks on the front lines of this crisis, our deputy DAs and our investigators. They have a lot of ideas about things that they can do in our community to help find drug dealers and hold them accountable. And I would want to work hand in hand with them to make sure that dangerous drug dealers are taken off of our streets.
Okay, very good. Monica, how would you address the drug crisis, including both fentanyl and methamphetamines, which, apparently is an enormous problem?
Yes, absolutely. So, first of all, I want to say condolences to you, Janessa. Thank you for being here. We know that you're very strong and a trooper. So thank you so much for being here. I do think that with the $100 million or so that the county will be receiving, that education is a big component of this. We've worked with a lot of nonprofit organizations, especially those that are raising kids. Grandparents Connection, for example, is one of them that have the ability to educate grandparents, parents, aunts, uncles, and young people about the severe nature of fentanyl. I think that that's very, very important, but I also think that we have to be able to have facilities now for people who know that they need help and want help. And we are lacking in that as well. So we need additional treatment facilities. Enforcement is a part of this, right? And I know there's been a lot of conversation from the state on down as to how do we balance enforcement, just trying to avoid what happened during the war on drugs, because we know during the war on drugs, we put a lot of people into a system that still they had to come out of, and they did not have the capacity to make it and re-enter themselves into society. So we just created and kicked a problem down the road. This is a public health crisis, and it has to be treated as such. So I think a balance between education, enforcement, and beefing up our treatment facilities is extremely important. Last thing, I would just want to agree on the Narcan issue, and also to have some type of qualification for nonprofit orgs is important too. We put it on the MTS transit line with our security folks there, and it's just very, very important.
Thank you, Monica. The next question deals with policing. The sheriff
I'd like
oversees.
to answer the question on fentanyl.
Sorry, go ahead,
Oh, that's okay.
Amy. Go ahead.
So how I come at this is I was a Celebrate recovery leader, and I've led thousands of people into treatment and recovery. But when it comes to fentanyl, all it takes is one time to take a life.
Yeah.
And as we've seen in the county, children as young as 13 have died. I'm absolutely for distributing more Narcan, making it available at restaurants and also schools. However, as we know, it only takes one time to take a life. And the source of fentanyl is it's coming over our border. And so although this is a federal issue, it does affect the county. And so what it's really going to take is a county supervisor who is going to stand up, protect our kids, and demand action from our federal government. Because right now there's been a 300% increase of fentanyl over our borders that they've confiscated since 2020. And as we know, it only takes a little. So I'm a big proponent of treatment and not punishment. But also when it comes to treatment, we've seen over the past 150 years that what we really still need to have are loving bottom lines. So it's perfectly fine to say to somebody who has overdosed repeatedly in an emergency room, the best place for you right now is mandatory treatment. We want to help you before you become another statistic. When it comes to law enforcement locally, yes, we would always want to hold a drug manufacturer or someone who makes or sells a product liable and possibly criminally responsible if their product resulted in the death of another human being. And so, yes, we do need to strengthen our laws, and I support DA Summer Steffen's plan to strengthen our laws against fentanyl dealers and suppliers. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Moving on to policing, we've touched on this a little bit. The sheriff oversees law enforcement in our unincorporated areas, and yet some of the unincorporated areas have very long response times, even for serious crimes. Other issues, of course, are the high number of jail deaths, and in the urban areas, concerns over equity and accountability by law enforcement. So I'm going to make this just kind of an open-ended question. What would each of your priorities be regarding law enforcement and specifically the sheriff's department? Let's see. I believe it is Monica's turn to go first on this one. Am I right?
I think so.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so I just, my priorities really.
Oh, and let's do a minute and a half for this one, I think, if that
Okay.
works. Is that enough? Okay.
Okay, I'll try to be quick. I'll talk about.
I think what I'm going to do is give everybody an extra 30-second bonus. So if there's a question someone feels strongly about and you want to use your extra 30 seconds, we'll throw that in, because I'm punting a little with one candidate missing here to be sure we're don't want that either over or short.
Sounds good. So I just want to say, first of all, in my current position, and I served as the chair of public safety and livable neighborhoods committee for 4 years as a city council member. And in those 4 years, I supported raises, wage increases for police officers. I supported lateral bonuses. I supported down payment assistance for police officers so that they can live in the neighborhoods that they serve. And so there are a lot of things that I supported. But I also was really vocal and will still be vocal about accountability. I understand that we have to be staffed up in order for law enforcement officials to do their job. And I definitely understand that. I also know that there's a disparity in the way that people are treated depending on where they live, how they identify, what they look like, right? And so there are things that we have to address, I think, as a nation, as a state, and as a region, but it does not forgo the responsibility that we have to fund law enforcement, right? So I approach it from both ends. I think that there are many communities that have different experiences with law enforcement officers, and that needs to be acknowledged and addressed. And the more that we can deploy the services more equitably, the better it is going to be for our entire region. We have one of the highest rates of jail deaths in San Diego County, in the entire state. And that has to be addressed. Some of it is a staffing issue, some of it is an accountability issue. And I will continue to address those as I have done in my last 5 years.
Okay, thank you very much. Amy, let's hear your views on policing.
Last year, I did a ride along with a 25-year veteran of the San Diego Police Department. And what he told me as we drove past some of the homeless encampments were nearly 100% of the people that live in the encampments are struggling with severe addiction. He also went on to say that Proposition 47, which was passed by the voters, which made stealing less than $900, something that was less serious, more of a civil citation rather than a criminal act, has called what he says lawlessness. What's happening is people stealing less than $900 from businesses. There's now organized crime rings that are going into these businesses and carefully calculating to steal just under $900. And of course, this goes hand in hand with the homeless encampments because it also fuels some people's drug addictions as well. And so one of my major platforms has been public safety. This year in April, the San Diego Police Officers Association awarded me an honorary badge patch, the same one that San Diego police officers wear on their sleeves when they're on the beat. And they did it to thank me for saving their jobs in 2021. And so what we've seen as a result, we've had a huge understaffing in the sheriff's department as well. And we're understaffed by 250 deputies at this time as morale is at an all-time low. And many of these officers are good people. Yes, we have to make sure that we hold the bad ones accountable, but we have to remember the good people that are serving and protecting us, and we need to reward them and make sure that they're able to afford to live in this county. I just want to conclude that the latest SANDAG numbers are not good that were just released in May. We're seeing a 10% increase in robberies. We're seeing an 8% increase in violent crimes against senior citizens. And horrifically, we're seeing a 9% increase in hate crimes. So what I believe what we need to do is support the good police, the good deputies that are protecting us, and make sure that they're able to get their numbers up so we can reduce those call times in the unincorporated county and also be able to stem this new wave of crime. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Janessa, could you please share your views on policing issues and what your priorities would be?
Sure. Well, I served for 7 years in the Marine Corps as a combat engineer officer, but I also had a collateral billet as a uniformed victim advocate. And in that role, my job was to help service members who had experienced sexual assault navigate the system, whether that was a criminal investigation or simply seeking care and services. And being exposed to the military's system of investigating and prosecuting these crimes made me very aware of how deeply flawed it was. And I became an outspoken advocate for accountability and change because the system was leaving too many people vulnerable and too many people without justice truly being served. And I continue to be an outspoken advocate for reforms, dramatic reforms to that system as the leader of a national veterans advocacy organization today. And I'm telling that story to illustrate that I'm very proud of my Marine Corps service. I'm very proud of being a Marine, but I think it's incredibly important to hold every organization accountable. And given that the San Diego County jail deaths are some of the highest in the state, it's incredibly important that our supervisors are holding the sheriff accountable to fixing the problem. And I know that the state has conducted an audit and made a series of recommendations. It would be my prerogative to hold monthly check-ins with the sheriff that on the flip side of that is making sure that our sheriffs and our deputies have the resources they need. I went on a ride along a couple weeks ago out in East County in the unincorporated area, and they were down 2 squad cars because they just didn't have the manning to be out there. We responded to a domestic violence call. It took us 30 minutes to get out there just because of how deep it was in the rural parts of the county. And I understand how terrifying that is for people who live there and want to make sure that if something is happening, that there is law enforcement there to handle it and to do so in a safe manner. So we absolutely need to pay people competitive wages. We need to invest in telling good stories about law enforcement officers that are doing great things in our community so that it is an attractive career choice for people, so that we can recruit officers from the communities that they're serving in and make sure that they can afford to live there as well.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you very much. And I do applaud those of you who've gone along on the ride along. I think it's a great way to really learn more and see what the problems are firsthand. Moving on to energy, another huge issue in East County. The county has set a goal, an ambitious goal, of reducing carbon emissions to net zero by 2024. But in May, after a lawsuit was filed over the regional decarbonization plan, the plaintiffs cited research indicating that infill projects such as solar on parking lots and rooftops in the urban areas and on green fields or brownfields would actually cost less and produce more power than building industrial scale wind projects and massive desert solar projects in the back country, which is largely what the original plan called for, because it didn't take into account the energy that's lost in the transmission or the cost of building all of those transmission lines. In May, the supervisors approved a new study on the feasibility of prioritizing infill projects, such as the rooftop and parking lot solar, over industrial scale wind and solar in the backcountry, which have had a lot of negative environmental consequences people may not be aware of on the wildlife, on the wetlands, quality of life of residents. And we've even had several of these turbines burst into flames and start fires. Thank goodness, never during red flag, conditions. So my question is, do you support the county goal of cutting carbon emissions to address climate change? And secondly, what are your views on the most appropriate way to meet those goals? And, particularly with regard to the scale and siting of new green energy projects. Let's see, I believe this one is Amy's turn to lead off.
Thank you. I do support the county's goal of net zero by 2035. In fact, we all attended a climate action social justice forum on Friday night in Hillcrest. Here's where I differ slightly from my fellow candidates, and that is,
and I forgot let's say 2 minutes on this. Go ahead.
As we're moving toward these goals, though, there are some things that we also need to take into consideration, and that's people. For example, I live right here in North La Mesa, and they want to put a battery storage facility not too far from homes. In fact, just feet from homes. And that sounds like a good project. It's going to store some of the solar energy and also be able to give us a better source of renewable energy. However, it also produces 75 decibels of noise that's comparable to a freeway. And so when it comes to these kind of projects that also have unintended consequences, causing fires, battery storage units have been known to explode or catch fire right here in the county. In fact, I just think that we should proceed cautiously as well when we're looking for these environmental goals. So as a for example, in the 2021 Regional Transportation Plan, the mileage tax is in Chapter 3. Now, we're still waiting to hear from the 2025 updated version, and we haven't seen if that mileage tax is still in there. And that would be how I would lead. I would want to lead with incentives rather than penalties to move us towards our environmental goals. I'm not in favor of a mileage tax locally or even on the state level. That would really hurt working class and marginalized communities the most. So you can absolutely count on me to protect the environment. I would just make sure that we would also want to make sure how it's affecting our working class people too, who are working so hard to stay here in the county.
Janessa, can you share your views, please, on energy priorities regarding meeting the sustainability goals, and how and where green energy projects should be cited.
Sure. Well, I have a long track record, and I'm on record in support of solar projects on rooftops and over parking lots. That's where solar belongs, in my opinion. I do think that we have a lot of work to do to meet our clean energy goals. I support the county's goal to decarbonize in the time frame that it's set for itself. And I think that when we think about emissions in this county, what are the largest contributors to greenhouse gases? It's cars on the road. And cars on the road, but we have to be realistic about where we live right now. And 95% of San Diegans drive. That's the reality. So how do we incentivize people to spend less time on the road? It's by building housing close to transit and providing more clean energy transit to parts of the county that currently don't have it. We obviously need to, we know that the state of California has goals about electric vehicles on the roads. Right now, we need to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. The reality is that people drive, and the transit infrastructure doesn't exist for it to make sense for a lot of people right now. We don't have mass transit to our airport, as a great example. There are very few places that work for people, but there are some parts of our transit system that do work really well. The Blue Line, for instance, from San Ysidro into downtown, 17 million people utilize the Blue Line, one of the most effective public transit routes in the nation. And so I'd like to look at taking what we've learned from the Blue Line and expanding that to other parts of the county. Doesn't just have to be fixed rail or trolley. It could also be clean energy electric buses. But thinking through how we can make transit more attractive to more users, that includes making sure it goes places people actually want to go, and it includes making sure it's safe and clean and people feel comfortable on it, and making sure that it's actually shaving time and making their day more efficient rather than a burden. And that's really where I'd like to put the bulk of my efforts.
Okay, thank you, Janessa. Monica, could we hear your views on energy issues and the siting of energy projects?
Yeah, absolutely. I do support the county goals. And also I know that the decarbonization plan is being challenged on the basis that, it really promotes the larger utility scale projects that do have their impacts on the environment. And I do think that we have to start phasing in more of the microgrid rooftop solar projects to create additional community infrastructure and control over these issues. I think that that's extremely important, but I also think that with regard to microgrids, this is an area that there's a lot of funding that we could receive from the state and federal government that could support small businesses in this area. This is a way to enhance it's that go between those that are putting solar on rooftops and then those that are doing the larger utility scale projects. It really is a middle ground that could be so beneficial for a lot of our community members. So I would love to focus on that and put, kind of shine a brighter light on the possibility around being able to build that type of generational wealth and with regard to small business and microgrid placement in the area of energy. Big supporter. We are now in the last stages of finalizing our plan for a green energy equity complex right in the heart of the city council district, which also happens to be right in the middle of the supervisorial district. This is something that businesses will come to, and also we'll have a partnership with the Unified School District so that young people can be introduced into the industry as well. So I think there's a lot of possibility here, and I'm really looking forward to digging into it more at the county.
Very good. Thanks to all of you on that. The Cottonwood Sand Mine is proposed along the Sweetwater River in Rancho San Diego, middle of District 4, just upstream from a federal wildlife preserve and very close to homes, schools, and businesses. The There's also been a proposal to sand mine El Monte Valley and Lakeside, right through a county designated scenic wildlife corridor, and again, close to homes and equestrian businesses. In both areas, the residents as well as environmentalists are generally opposed to the projects, although the developers will say that the sand is needed for construction and roadway projects locally. So I would like to know what your priorities would be if these projects come before you in weighing whether or not to approve proposed sand mines in our region. Janessa, you're first on this one.
Yeah, I've heard from a number of residents who live near these proposed projects about how concerned they are, and I think with good reason. I certainly would not want a sand mine going in my backyard, and especially for the unincorporated areas. Understanding how challenging it is to get resources to repair their roads. There's a lot of deep concern about the effects of not just the mining operation itself, but trucks, heavy duty trucks transiting through the neighborhoods and over surface roads and the damage they could cause. So, obviously we have a need for construction here in the county. However, we also know that with existing building technology and new technologies, there are additional alternatives to sand, and there are ways to reduce building costs outside of construction materials. One way the county could be very helpful there is by streamlining some of our permitting processes to speed up the process for builders, and also looking at reducing some of our impact fees where it makes sense to do so when we want to build. So I want to think about ways that we can make construction more affordable and cheaper so that we can build homes faster. But I don't want to do that at the expense of our environment or the neighborhood, so to speak, for people who are living right there. I think that would be a very invasive project, and I'm not sure I'm buying the reason why it's important. So that's how I feel about it. Of course, every project is different, and we need to evaluate it as things as they come before the board. But that's my general approach, especially given where both of these projects are in relation to open spaces and wildlife corridors.
Very good. Thank you. Monica, let's hear your views on how you would assess whether or not to approve sand mines should they come before you on the supervisors.
Yeah, I'm with the community on this one. I've come out fairly early, especially in opposition to the Cottonwood sand mine. I think that, where this is 2023 and there are many innovative ways to get the material that we need. We all are in agreement that we need to build, but we have to find other ways to do this. And, the East County residents that I have talked to are all against this, no matter how they identify otherwise. There is a consensus that, that folks are tired of feeling like the dumping ground. And then this is another example of that. And so, I definitely stand with the community, and I think it's important, to emphasize that as we've all, I think, been told by residents that we will, in this capacity as supervisor, be servicing these communities as council members and or as their mayor, right, for the unincorporated areas. And so it's important to really be vocal about the issues that come from the community. And I definitely have experience in that and serving as a council member. And some of the issues really line up with some of the disillusionment we have with residents around, having proper representation. And so this is really one of those issues where community members, are very reasonable community members, are saying, no, we do not want this. And then we're looking at also the environmental impact. So, I would be against sand mining. We have to come up with other ways to find and retrieve this material that we need to build.
Thank you. Amy, could we please hear your views on sand mining?
I've spoken with former Supervisor Diane Jacob on this issue. She's been leading the community effort against this sand mine. And I agree with her and the community that this is not an appropriate place in the community, that it's going to have far too many negative impacts on the residents, but also the environment. But also, I've heard from people who say, you know what, we want an affordable place to live. And the fact of the matter is concrete. And that's what sand is, the main ingredient to make concrete. comes from. So what's happening, as I've spoken to people in this industry, and no, I have not been endorsed by the developers and I'm not beholden to them at all, but I do hear from all stakeholders on these issues. And what they're telling me is, Amy, right now we have to go out of state to get sand. So of course that hurts the environment too. If we have to bring in sand from Arizona, for example, or Nevada. So making San Diego affordable, protecting our environment, protecting communities, and allowing communities to have a voice is essential. So I just want to reiterate that I am against this particular project. I believe that it's better placed, that we can all come together and find a much better location in the county that's not going to hurt the environment or the community, that will also help us build those affordable homes. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Transportation is an important issue. Some of you have touched on this already in your earlier answers, but not everyone. The county has been striving to increase transit ridership, and yet congestion has increased on some highways and surface streets. Rural residents have also voiced concern over a couple of things, a bait and switch sometimes when projects were built and they were promised that, Highway 52 would be finished, or the connection of 125 and 94, which is yet unfinished. Rural residents have also voiced concerns over the mileage tax that would be paid for by everyone, even those who live in areas that don't have mass transit. So I would like to ask, how would you juggle those sort of competing priorities of improving transportation, getting people to ride more mass transit, and yet being equitable to all residents, including those who just live too far out to have that access? Monica, I believe you're first on this one.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So the way you handle this is very carefully because we're dealing with a lot of different things. One is dealing with things that the community has already been promised, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think funding for those projects should certainly be prioritized above anything else. And I also just am a firm believer that in order to go, back to the people and ask them for additional money in any capacity, then we have to be trustworthy and efficient with what we've already asked for, right? And so I think just on principle, we have to break the projects down and prioritize them based on what has already been promised and what may be in the future. Now, all of this, on top of all of this, we have state mandates. We cannot run away from those. Those are there, and oftentimes we have this conversation in a bubble, not kind of making the connection that we're making decisions about things that we have to do, that we are required to do now by state, especially if we want to meet our climate action goals, right? And so that is extremely important. I want to build out the mobility hubs wherever we can, and within those mobility hubs, as stated in a bit of the Sandag 5 Big Moves plan, we can have shuttle service. We can have what we talked about a lot in these forums of first and last mile service in those mobility hubs. There are many ways to get there, but the plan, is being built out, and I am committed to that, especially for our rural communities that, again, have been promised these things and haven't yet seen them. So the way that I would handle it and break it out is what has already been promised and is supposed to be funded, and then what are our future goals moving forward, and then how can we responsibly fund those, being of course, responsible with what we said we were already going to do.
Thank you. Amy, let's hear from you on transportation priorities and the mileage tax.
So on Friday evening, we all did attend a climate action social justice forum, and I decided to ask a question of the audience, and there were 200 people there. And it was so awesome to see so many people passionate about the environment. And the question came about public transportation. So I said, by a show of hands, how many of you took public transportation to this event tonight? Only 2 out of that entire audience took public transportation to the event. Now, this group of people you would expect would have the most buy-in and would want to ride public transportation. But what we're finding is people are just finding that public transportation is not working for them. I've been around San Diego County long enough. I voted for the Transnet sales tax. I had high hopes that the sales tax would be used by Sandag to improve our roads. I'm a North La Mesa resident. My son actually goes to school in Spring Valley. And so every single morning I have to take that 94 125 interchange. And every morning I feel as if we are taking our lives in our own hands. It is that dangerous and it needs to be improved. And people have been waiting decades for that improvement. And I recently did go out to a community meeting. It was in La Mesa. It was put on by Caltrans about the 94 125 upgrade. So we do need to fulfill those promises. People have paid that money into Sandag to use to upgrade projects such as 94 and 125. Instead, what we've been seeing is the money has been diverted into public transportation and people are just not buying into it. Even people you would expect most likely to do so. And the reason being is it just doesn't fit the needs of average San Diegans. So if we're going to take on public transportation, we have to completely reimagine it. I do not want to see a situation like we have with the state of California, where billions and billions and billions have been spent on this bullet train to nowhere. So if money is going to be allocated through Sandag for public transportation, I do not believe in putting the money into a broken system. I am against a mileage tax on the county level and the state level. And I believe that public transportation needs to be completely reimagined.
Janessa, could we hear your views on transportation, please?
Yeah, I think San Diegans have a right and a reasonable expectation of being pretty distrustful of Sandag. Many things have been promised, few have been delivered. And there is certainly a healthy skepticism about increasing additional taxes on the backs of working and middle class families. I do not support a vehicle mileage tax either. I think that the chair of the County Board of Supervisors has made it very clear that that's not something that's in the pipeline. And I don't think it will be. When it does, when and if it does, that's probably a statewide conversation, and we're going to have to work really closely with our state partners there. But I do believe that there are simple things we can do in the short term to make our transit system more accessible to more people. One thing we could do to reduce time that it takes for the trolley to get from stop to stop is by building overpasses over trolley stops so that the trolley doesn't actually have to stop for road intersections. This is a tried and true method that increases the speed of the route, but also it reduces traffic deaths, noise. The trolley doesn't have to blow its horn, etc. When it comes to the rural parts of the county, I'd like to really significantly invest in both making sure that the roads are drivable. As Amy mentioned, there's some really rough spots out there. There's funding that has been promised that has not yet materialized, been delivered. I spoke earlier about the success of the Blue Line. I do want to point out that until we put the shovel in the dirt, it took 30 years to get to that point. So it was a very successful project once shovels hit the dirt, but it took 30 years to get there. So we need to be serious about making investments now. The federal government, there is historic amounts of funding coming from the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, the Inflation Reduction Act, billions and billions of dollars that are available to the county. I want to make sure our county gets its fair share. I'm proudly endorsed by the majority of our federal delegation, and I would want to work with them and our grant writers at the county to ensure we're going after every single available dollar and putting it to work now, that we're not just waiting for a 30-year plan to materialize, but we're making investments now that help people who are trying to get to work and spend less time in their cars.
Super. Let's see. I think everyone's spoken on that one. I'm going to throw in a couple of lightning round questions since we have a little bit of extra time today. But you mentioned infrastructure. We have a crumbling and very dangerous dam out here at the out in Lakeside, the El Capitan Dam, and also the Sweetwater Dam. Both of these are old dams where if they were to break, it would be catastrophic. And in the case of the one in Lakeside, it's right by an active earthquake fault. But would each of you commit, we'll just make this 30 seconds, yes or no, if you get an opportunity to speak up to our federal representatives about infrastructure priorities, to ask for some money to get these dangerous dams fixed once and for all. Let's see. I think Janessa, you would be first on that one.
Is this just a yes or no?
Pretty much, I mean, yeah, would
Absolutely. Yeah.
this
Yes,
is more of making
we
sure
need-
everyone's aware of how bad these things are. I
We
should add,
absolutely
they both have the highest capacity potential for loss of life, and they're rated the most dangerous in the worst condition that the state can possibly rate a dam.
This just gets back to my earlier point. Like, San Diego County gets its butt kicked in per capita federal funding by other counties around the state. We'll have these two dams that are crumbling and extraordinarily dangerous. This should be something that is a priority for the state and for the federal government. And so we need to make sure that we're getting our fair share to address it.
Okay, Monica, how about you?
Yes, absolutely. So certainly will advocate for the dams and restoration of them. We at the city of San Diego, we propped up a government affairs office that deals directly with the state and federal government. I've also been endorsed by Congresswoman Sarah Jacobson, Congresswoman Barbara Lee, quite a few state officials as well. And so, yes, this would certainly be something that I bring up in those conversations.
Okay, and Amy.
Yes, absolutely. I do not accept the status quo when I hear elected officials say, oh, well, our hands are tied, or the state mandates this, or the state is making us do that. I will stand up for county residents, and I will advocate for us at the state and the federal level.
Okay. On fire safety, the fire season has really become year-round with climate change and more and worse fires. They're saying this may be the worst season yet. We've seen fire response really improve in our region. I think that's something they've done generally very, very well. And we're seeing multiple agencies just pouncing on these fires. I would like to ask each of you, will you commit not to cut firefighting resources if the budget gets thin? Will you commit to do everything possible to keep full funding for firefighting out here in East County and all of the unincorporated areas, actually? And the second part of that is, unfortunately, we've seen the sheriff's department get rid of the ability for the public and the press to listen to scanners. That happened in January in response to a state law that requires that either you have to take stuff off the scanners or you have to put it on a secure channel so that nobody's private information accidentally gets broadcast, which I've never heard happen. But the problem we're seeing now is that while the San Diego police, did the latter so that you can still listen to their scanners, same with CAL FIRE, San Diego Sheriff has just taken it completely offline, and they've ignored pleas from the media to put it back on. And what that means is that there's a lot of things that we're not able to alert the public about that are true crises in public safety, like hearing evacuation warnings live when they're happening, hearing about an escaped prisoner that was running around by Grossmont Hospital. We shouldn't be finding out about that like, the next day, if at all. We should be able to listen live and hear that. So my two questions are, will you commit not to cut firefighting funding? And two, will you, push the sheriff, maybe holding a hearing on this scanner issue and try to get them to put it back online, put only the secure information on a secure channel like San Diego Police does, keep everything else, make it available again for the press and the public to listen to during emergencies. I've lost track. I think this is Amy's to go first on.
I'm 100% for transparency and openness when it comes to government. So I would support having those frequencies open to the media, for example, as long as private information is secured and there's no chance of, say, a domestic violence victims information coming out or a crime victims information. So I just want to say a yeah, but to that. And then last year, I was completely surprised by the San Miguel firefighters. Someone called me on the phone and said, Amy, your face is on Highway 8. And I had no idea what she was talking about. And it turned out the San Miguel firefighters did a billboard for me saying, we support Amy Reichert for supervisor. So firefighters know that they have my back. And I absolutely agree that our firefighters, our first responders absolutely should make enough money to be able to live in our county. And that simply hasn't been the case. So yes, I support more funding for firefighters.
Okay, Janessa, how about you on the fire response funding and the scanner issue?
Yeah, I'm very proud to be endorsed by San Diego County firefighters, and I absolutely understand how stretched thin they are as well. They are also facing a staffing shortage, and that means that with increasing wildfire season basically being all year round and supporting fires in other parts of the state, our folks are always on mandatory overtimes. As a Marine, knowing how deployments are on your family, knowing what it's like to be away from your family and not have a sense of knowing when you're going to be back. I know how stressful and straining that is. It's not just a dollars and cents issue, it's also a morale and mental health issue. So it's absolutely imperative that we give our firefighters the resources they need to be able to recruit and retain the right levels of staffing, and that they have the equipment necessary. When it comes to the scanner issue, I've lived in rural areas where the police scanner is your source of news about weather or otherwise. I know how important that can be to folks who live in other parts of our county. And so I agree with Amy. I would want to ensure that, victims' information doesn't make it out into the general public. But it sounds like there's definitely great models and examples out there of ways that you can broadcast information that the public needs to know while also protecting the identities of victims.
Very good. And Monica, your views on the fire funding and wildfire funding and the pushing the sheriff to restore scanner access?
Yeah, I think that the sheriffs should restore scanner access with, the framework that protects everyone who needs to be protected for sure. And if others are doing it, I'm sure that the sheriffs can as well without giving up any of that information that should be private. So I do support that. Also support continued funding for our firefighters and in their wildfire efforts. In the previous election, I was endorsed by Local 145 San Diego firefighters. In 2018, I was not supported by them, but still went in and fought for raises and equipment and everything that they needed. So this is really, not about one person, but our primary job is public safety. Firefighters are a huge part of that, and so I would absolutely support their efforts.
Super. Well, it's time for closing statements. I'm going to give each of you 2 minutes. If you could also include in there a couple of your major endorsements, who's backing you, and why you believe you're the best candidate for a job, and where people can find more information about you. Let's see. Janessa, your turn to go first.
Sure. Well, thanks for everyone who's tuned in and watching. Really appreciate you being part of the process. And of course, ballots are in the mail now, so voting has begun. And I'd be honored to earn your vote and your support. I spent 7 years as a combat engineer officer in the Marines. Over the last 15 years, I've worked as a policy advocate to make change at both the federal, state, and the local level. And I'm very proud to bring that experience, to put it to work for my hometown. I think that local government is important, it's powerful, but we're not going to solve our problems on our own. And that's why I'm proud to say I'm endorsed by the majority of our federal delegation, our state delegation, and elected officials and community groups across the region. I'm also, as I mentioned, proudly endorsed by our county firefighters, by the San Diego County Medical Society, Vote Vets, and other groups across the county and the state. At the end of the day, the reason that I'm involved in politics and running for elected office is that this is my home. It really matters to me what happens here. I had the experience of taking care of my mom in the last stages of her life as she struggled with MS and Alzheimer's. And I understood how fragile her system of care and her ability to live independently really was. I see so many people around our county who are just one paycheck away or one catastrophic health incident away from winding up on the street. I know that people my age are concerned about their parents who have kids who are struggling with addiction or mental health issues are concerned about them. Our whole community is deeply frightened because we are all living on the brink, on an edge. And I want to make sure that people have the resources they need. The county has the ability to provide in-home supportive services to seniors, to help people stay in their homes, to help people get addiction treatment and counseling. If we really lean in and think big. For too long, we've accepted the status quo. For too long, we've said the county's not really a part of these conversations. It's time to change that. Politics as usual is not working. I've never accepted the status quo. I will get in there and fight, and I'd be honored to earn your support. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you so much, Janessa Goldbeck. Monica, could we hear your closing statement, please? Monica Montgomery Steppes.
It's a mouthful, I know. Thank you so much, Miriam, for having us here this afternoon. You know, as I'm going through this race, I am continually reminded of my own story. As a 20-year-old, I got very, very sick in Atlanta, Georgia, while I was at Spelman College. I had to come home. My mother had to take care of me. We had to apply for county services. And if the county had not been there for us, I really don't know where I'd be today. But I also saw in that process that there were flaws, that people who are in their most vulnerable state need to be able to apply and have dignity and respect as a human being. And so I am very committed, will bring that additional lens to this seat, in addition to already having served as an elected official, understanding bureaucracies, taking some of the most controversial issues and coming out the other side with unanimous vote and implementation. That's really what we need to tackle the crises that we are in right now. That's what I bring to the table. And I'm very honored just to be able to run and to express that to everyone in East County and throughout this supervisorial district. I have been endorsed by a lot of, quite a few elected officials at every level of government. I'm proud of them all. I mentioned Congresswoman Sarah Jacobs, Congresswoman Barbara Lee, Secretary of State Shirley Weber, Assemblymember Akilah Weber, Assemblymember David Alvarez, but also Councilmember Jack Shue, Councilmember Patricia Dillard, Councilmember Jennifer Mendoza, Councilmember George Gastel, those who are very, very familiar with the East County and can continue to express those concerns to me. And so this is really a groundbreaking election, a lot of involvement, which I'm grateful for. And I'm just hoping that that proven experience and track record will be the difference for this race. So thank you so much for your time.
Very good, Monica. Thanks so much. Amy Reichert, we'll let you have the final word here.
Well, hopefully my house isn't too noisy. Kids are home from school, from summer break, and my dog has just decided to start barking. But what I really wanted to share was why I got involved in the past couple of years. And the reason being I got involved is because what I saw were the policies, the failed policies of Nathan Fletcher the past couple of years. No one can deny there's not one measurable metric in the county of San Diego where we are better off than we were just 5 years ago. So I bring my strong business mindset with me as a small businesswoman. Also, my leadership in founding and scaling very quickly a successful nonprofit that saved thousands of workers' jobs right here in the county. And so what I really have a proven track record of is my heart and listening to people from all different sides. That being said, I am the San Diego Republican Party endorsed candidate in this race. I do have the endorsement of 2 current sitting supervisors, Supervisor Jim Desmond and also Supervisor Joel Anderson. I have the endorsement of former Supervisor Kristen Gaspar. I have the endorsement of 2 current sitting congressmen, Kevin Kiley, as well as Daryl Issa, as well as 5 local mayors. And that's really what it's going to take. It's going to take a regional approach to solve the problems that we have here. And I just want to add that I do not believe at the end of the day that government is necessarily the solution to our problems. Many times it's government that's getting in the way and is causing the problems. I believe that if government got out of the way when it comes to housing, we would see more housing being built that is more affordable for local San Diegans. So if anybody wants to reach out to me, my email address is Amy, A-M-Y, at amyforsandiego.com. My website is amyforsandiego.com. I really do respond to emails and I want to hear from you. If you'd like to volunteer in my campaign, well, it's game on right now. As we know, there are 29 days left until the last day to vote, and people will be receiving their ballots in the mail today and tomorrow. So look for those and make sure that everybody votes. It's so important to encourage people to vote. Thank you.
Thank you all very much. I want to mention that the ballots are being mailed, as you noted, to every registered voter in the district. You can vote by mail. You can vote early at early voting locations. You can vote at the registrar's office. If anyone didn't get a ballot or still wants to register, you can visit sdvote.com. The last day to vote is August 15th, and if no candidate receives a majority, then there will be a runoff election this fall. I want to encourage all of the candidates to think of us as a resource here at East County Magazine. I know not everybody is familiar with rural issues or agricultural issues or some of the things we didn't even touch on, but that you may be asked to vote upon on the supervisors. So think of us as a resource here to help you as well. I really appreciate our diverse array of candidates taking the time here to join us in our forum to help voters make informed decisions. And I also want to thank everybody watching on our Facebook page. We will be posting, for those who missed it or came in late, the entire video of the forum on our website at eastcountymagazine.org, as well as more information on the candidates, including Paul McQuigg, who was not able to join us here today due to a connectivity problem while he was traveling. So thanks so much, and good luck to all of you in the upcoming election.
Thank you.